BSG have changed how the latest event that is kind of like, I guess, what would be the Halloween event for Tarkov's PVE mode slightly. So the boss spawn rates have gone up, which allows you to find cultists far easier. And this has opened up one of the best methods that you can possibly do to be able to farm both rubles and gear, as well as being able to get a ton of the highest quality ammunition within the game, and also be able to not only do that, but complete these tasks which have been elusive for a lot of people on PvE, as cultist spawns aren't always the easiest to predict, at least with the event previously to the update, which now allows those spawns to be much higher, allowing us to finally complete these events. But how can we use this to our advantage? And if you aren't particularly interested in completing every single one of the operations, you'll do it in the background during this, but at the same time, if you're just after kind of getting that loot, getting the XP, because the XP is crazy as well, let's get into it. If you like Escape from Tarkov and you want to see more, then be sure to like this video as it helps me out massively, and we'll get into the actual loadout that you actually need to complete this operation quickly, or at least the one that I would recommend for taking out the cultists. Now, as a bit of a background to what this method entails, we're going to be running it on Factory. Now, Factory can be done in both the daytime and the nighttime. It's always guaranteed to be in the nighttime because it's a static time zone, whereas you look at something like Streets and it's a dynamic time zone. You have, you know, for example, 10 in the morning or 10 at night. As you can see here, Factory is always the same time zone. Now, cultist spawns are always between like 10 in the evening and I believe it's something like 6 in the morning, something like that. And so you can only find the cultists during those time periods. And so Factory, having it always set to 3, allows you to go into your factories and be able to constantly have the chance of finding cultists within there. And with the increased chances that, as I mentioned, it's going to make it a lot easier. So in terms of loadout wise for dealing with cultists, the only real thing that you need, and my recommendation, would be to run 60 round mags. Now, this is not the best in terms of performance of your weapon with regards to ergonomics, but at the same time, the kind of overall utility of having a 60 rounder versus a 30 rounder is really handy, because a lot of the times you're going to be facing off against lots of opponents when the cultists do spawn in your raid. So 60 rounders and just loading it with whatever ammunition you feel comfortable with. For me, I was just running M856A1 and that pretty much dealt with the cultists as of when I needed to, and primarily going for those head taps as well if you can get them, and once you've done that, it's really not too difficult in terms of getting your loadout set up. You can use pretty much any weapon. I was using a SR3M, I've used a wide variety of different weapons, and I was even trying out a pistol to go around and just have a bit of fun, make it a bit more challenging. And the only thing you really have to worry about with regards to the cultists, at least from my experience, is the fact that they do have those knives, and if they do hit you, you really need to get out of the raid very quickly, because they do give you a kind of passive but also lethal dose of kind of like a toxin that is on their knives. And so if they do hit you with one of those, you do need to extract pretty much straight away, or you have to use an antidote which will kind of stop the effect of those, or at least minimize the effect of those. You still need to get out of the raid though, so avoiding that and making sure that you've got decent armor on is going to help you with that in all regards. But also the fact that some of the ammunition that these guys are running, the cultists themselves, especially the priest boss, which is going to be on Factory, because they don't spawn like the 3 group of essentially like cultist goons, because they do spawn on things like customs and woods. And so in terms of ammunition wise, they do have BS, which is actually insanely strong. It's one of the best rounds in the game. You can see Penn's level 6 armor, so pretty much regardless of what armor you're taking, if you find the cultists, they're going to go straight through you, so you got to be quite wary of when they do actually aggro onto you. But when you jump into the raid, the first thing that you're going to want to do when you have got your loadout all set up with the best armor that you have and ensuring it all, is to listen out for scavs. Because if you hear no scavs in your raid, that means that there is essentially no, that there is going to basically be cultists in your raid. Because the cultists basically take the spawn of like the scavs on Factory. Whenever I find that there is cultists on the map, there is no scavs spawning. Literally 0 scavs scavs at all. So maybe that isn't necessarily the case, or at least they take up a large proportion of the spawns and therefore maybe only find one scav. But from what I have found from doing this multiple times is that you only really ever get scavs spawning when there isn't cultists on the map, at least currently. And so with that being said, you're just listening straight away when you go into that night factory raid, is listening for the sound of scavs. You're throwing nades, always taking in 4 different nades, really useful. Now, if you do run out of nades, obviously, hopefully by that time, you're going to have at least taken out a PMC or someone which you can grab out nades. Cultists do actually spawn the nades as well, so you can grab those off of them. And also the fact that they have some of the best armors in the game. You can get level 6 plates off of some of these cultists as well. And when you take out their mags, even if they've got a terrible weapon, it's always worth taking the mags out because of the fact that you can grab up some of the best ammunition in the game out of their loadout. So it's really imperative to kind of at least try and farm this. I was getting like 15k XP just from taking out a couple of PMCs and the scav boss, or at least the cultist priest, which is Zhrek, I believe. And of course, that's not including if you go on some of the other maps and stuff like that. But today's video is primarily about factory. In terms of where I found the cultists spawning, if I was going to be honest, they pretty much spawn kind of in the central location on PVE. They'll actually often fight some of the PMCs in the game, so the interaction between both of those is actually negative, so they will fight each other. It's not like they're passive to one another. It doesn't mean that if you come and waltz in that they both won't target you. Maybe that happens, but in terms of if you wait a little bit within the raid and you often hear fighting, but you're not hearing any scavs when you're lobbing nades or anything like that, it's probably because the cultists and the PMCs in your raid are actually fighting. Now, from my experience of what I've noticed within the raids is that you're actually finding that the cultists themselves are pretty much stronger than the PMCs within the game, and actually I've found a ton of PMCs being taken out by the cultists, which is great because of the fact that your PMCs are out of the raid and you can take their gear just because they've been fighting one another, but you can also then take out the cultists quite easily because of the fact that they're kind of in positions that might be a bit bugged or whatever, and so it makes farming the cultists as well as the PMCs quite easy. Now, when it comes to gameplay against cultists, you're pretty much wanting to go kind of upper chest area because of the fact that obviously as your recoil goes up, you're going to hit their head, and most of them do not have like the best gear in the world, and so you're going to be able to really easily get that gear out of the raid and obviously tap them out of the game. And one of the best things about it is that the upper chest, because of a lot of these kind of cultists actually having armors that are like the slick, the coverage of those armors isn't the best at all either. Which means if you land consecutive shots into the upper chest, just above the armor plates, because typically they're kind of mid-chest level, rather than covering the full throat area, you're going to be able to take them out really easily. And I think that is kind of where I will be aiming every single time that I come up against a cultist. Now, obviously, Tagilla can still spawn. He does spawn in your raids, especially if you don't get the cultists on the map. Now, I haven't had any instance where there's been cultists and Tagilla, so it's pretty much seems to be either you get the cultists or you get Tagilla, or you just get scavs on their own and PMCs. Now, PMCs throughout every single one of those, and so you are going to have to deal with some of the harder aspects, I guess, if you're not used to playing the PvE mode, or at least less experience. Maybe you haven't spent anywhere near as long as I have definitely spent too long on the game, and so being able to run through with a fully automatic AI is probably what I would recommend. An SMG, the Uzi Pro, you've got all of these sorts of different main armaments that you can use to your advantage, and I'd highly recommend doing that as opposed to running with some of the different variants that you have in the game, the marksmans and that sort of stuff, like the DMRs, that sort of stuff. You pretty much want a full auto weapon because a lot of those engagements are going to be rapid fire. You'll find that the PMC's cultists are very close to one another, so you need those 60 rounders, like I said, to be able to target down one and then instantly swap to another, and it's quite fast paced. But once you've taken out pretty much the cultists, you'll find that you've kind of sequentially also taken out the PMCs because they're typically in the same sort of areas in the center of the map. Now they can be underneath, so down by the silos in the center of the map. You can find the PMCs and the cultists kind of being located around the larger garage area where you'll find a forklift and that sort of area. That's where I've typically found them. So if you want to jump in, I'd highly recommend it at the minute. The amount of loot that I've been able to take out, like some of the top tier like stuff that you just genuinely can't even buy off the flea, the level 6 plates. This is genuinely one of the best things that I think you can farm in the game right now, and I wanted to make a video just to discuss and tell you the most efficient way that I found after testing on different maps and stuff like that, the best way that I found to farm up the cultists. Now if you are specifically trying to complete later tasks in the kind of cultist quest line, then you only have to take out 5 cultists in general, which I'd highly recommend doing on factory. It's the easiest, quickest and fastest way to find if there are cultists on the map. And then as you go through, you also have to take out the kind of cultist leaders and stuff like that, as well as taking out a ton of cultists on all of the different maps that they can spawn on. So pretty much everyone can complete the first one within maybe like 5 factory raids, something like that. On average, I've been finding it's about a 50-50 whether you'll get the cultists on factory. If you see that there's any scavs in the game, I pretty much just try and extract, take out whatever you need to in that process, and then just extract, go straight back into another one, and it's just rinse and repeat. And the amount of armors that I've been getting is pretty ridiculous, and I'd highly recommend doing this method if you are just simply wanting to get XP, if you're simply wanting to farm ammunition and get some of the best gear in the game. This is definitely the way to go, and I think it was a great thing that BSG did up the spawn rate of the cultists, because lots of people were finding that they just genuinely couldn't find the cultists at all. I was included in that on factory raids. I just simply could not find the cultists when the event first launched. And so yeah, hopefully this video helps you out, and hopefully you'll go in and get as much gear as you possibly can right now, especially those high level plates, so that you don't have to worry about getting them from other maps. It's just that simple. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.